My guest this afternoon is Dr. Susan Enfield. Susan is Superintendent of the Highline Public Schools in Washington State. Good afternoon, Susan.
Hello, Doug. Nice to be with you.
And great to be with you. Susan and I will be talking about how she has handled what I call the Energizer-in-Chief role during the COVID-19 crisis in the Highline schools. Why don't we begin, Susan, by you telling us a bit about the Highline schools and about the community you serve?
Sure, happy to. So Highline is a richly diverse school system. We serve approximately 18,000 students in grades pre-K through 12, and we are located just outside Seattle, Washington in Burien. In fact, if you ever come to Seattle and you fly into SeaTac International Airport, you are landing in Highline. Because
I hope to be flying soon again.
Yeah. So when you fly to Seattle and you land in SeaTac, you are in our district. And we welcome you. So we, as I said, we are richly diverse. We take that as a point of pride. And we also believe in student first language. We don't like reducing our students to labels. So I will share with you that of the 18,000 students that we serve, roughly 13,000 of them rely on us for most, if not all, of their meals every day. Approximately 10,000 of them come to us speaking a first language other than English. And over 3,000 of them come to us needing special services. So we use that language rather than just putting a label on our students. I will also tell you that I describe our children in Highline and our young adults as brilliant, beautiful, and brimming with promise, because I believe they all are. Regardless of circumstance, they all come to us with an incredible amount of potential. And I feel incredibly fortunate to work with a team here in Highline who believes that along with me. From our board to our central office staff to our classroom teachers and support staff, everybody believes in our kids. So much so that rather than having a mission or vision, which a lot of school systems have, we've made a promise. And our Highline Promise is to know every student by name, strength, and need, so they graduate prepared for the future they choose. And those are not just words on paper. It really is our why. It's our DNA, really, in our system. We don't make a decision in Highline without thinking about how it aligns to that promise. And so I'm incredibly proud to live, lead, and serve here in this district, in this community.
Well, it sounds like you're in a great community. And I love, by the way, that promise.
Yeah.
That's so much more effective than a traditional vision statement.
It implies action, which I think is really important.
Oh, I think it's tremendously important. So our subject today is crisis management, and specifically how you played the Energizer-in-Chief role in the COVID-19 crisis. And indeed, it is a crisis of tremendous magnitude.
Yes, it is.
Now, since closing the schools, how long have the schools been closed now, Susan?
Our last day with students was March 12th.
March 12th, okay. Since closing the schools, what has the district done to keep students on what you might call the learning track, and to help students cope with the challenges in their lives today?
That's a great question. So actually our response to that began prior to closure. In the weekend before closure happened, just watching the news and seeing the lockdowns in places like Venice and Milan, my gut told me that we had to brace ourselves for something similar here. And so in conversations that week with other superintendents and ultimately with our state superintendent and the governor, it became clear that the governor would likely make a closure decision that Thursday. Unfortunately, the announcement wasn't going to come until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And Friday, this was problematic because that Friday, this was a Thursday, that Friday was a non-student day for us. And that meant that our students would leave on Thursday and not come back at the time for what we thought would be 6 to 8 weeks. Now, of course, it's for the remainder of the school year. And as I mentioned earlier, we are a richly diverse school system, which we are very proud of. And we have many students in our system who rely on school for their lifeline, right? School is their place of stability. It's their place of safety. It's where they are seen and loved in a way that they may not be elsewhere. And so for the thought for me of our students going home that Thursday, not knowing that closure had happened, and waking up the next morning and being told you're not going back to school would have inflicted a trauma on many of them that I just found just unconscionable. And so fortunately, I have an exceptional team here in Highline, and we scrambled and were able to get talking points to our staff so that teachers before the end of the school day that Thursday talked with our students about the fact that school was closing and why, and allowed them some time to process, which we felt was incredibly important. Once closure happened and we had to start responding, the first thing that we got into place was meals. We wanted to make sure that we could feed our students every day of the week, and we have done that. To date, I believe that we're probably approaching about 40,000 meals that we've provided to children, students, young people across our district. We do that 5 days a week across over a dozen sites in our district, which is really incredible. The second thing we really had to do was make sure that we were communicating with families what was happening, and communicating with our staff what their new roles were going to look like. That was a big question. And so communication became sort of the order of the day in those early days, to make sure people knew what was going on. And then, of course, our teaching, learning, and leadership team started developing a distance learning plan, which initially was just to provide students with opportunities to connect, engage, and practice. The original thought was that we wouldn't be offering new instruction. Of course, that changed a couple weeks in. And so I'm proud that our distance learning plan was well established and laid out very clear guidelines and expectations for both elementary and secondary, and also has a very solid social emotional learning component, because we know that's needed more than ever. That's always a big part of what we do in Highline, but it's more important now than ever. And then finally, we knew that for distance learning to work, our kids needed devices. So we have deployed to date over 12,000 devices for students across the system.
12,000?
Yes, to make sure that they can connect. Our technology services team and actually staff from all over have just made it a priority to make sure that our kids got those devices in their hands.
Well, you've been very active.
Yes, it's been a busy
obviously. Let's home in on the Energizer-in-Chief role. First, the educational dimension of that role. Tell us how you've handled that, Susan.
Sure. So, Doug, I've always had a little more energy than the average bear. In fact, when I first got to Highline, I remember some of my board members saying to me, and I'm really, really blessed. Right now, my current board president and vice president were the president and vice president who hired me. So they've been on the board since I've been here in my 8th year. So I have a fabulously supportive board. But that first year when I got here, a few of them would say to me, Susan, you go so fast, you go so fast. And, and I would very lovingly and respectfully reply, I'm only going as fast as our kids need me to go, which means I'm never going fast enough. So the question,
that's a great answer.
when is everybody else going to pick up the pace? Because we've got to get things done for kids. And that's now become a joke with my board members and me. However, for another podcast, it was also a good lesson as a new superintendent to realize you've got to make sure that you balance that sense of urgency and pace with keeping your board engaged and informed with you. But again, another time. So,
but are you going to come back to that?
Yeah,
board, because that's a very important subject. And
yes. So again, I am used to operating at a pretty quick speed. I will say, as I mentioned before, I think just watching what was happening in the world and my gut telling me that sometimes as leaders, we have to listen to our gut. And my gut was right. Closure came. It came to us quickly. And I think, though, because my gut told me it was coming and I alerted my nutrition services staff, I said, order the meals. I alerted my chief academic officer, the week before, start getting the materials together. So we had a little bit of a head start, but it certainly wasn't enough to get things done as quickly as we would like. I would say that from the educational standpoint, I'm incredibly proud of the rate at which our team came together to put together a solid distance learning plan, but also they've put together hard copy packets for our elementary learners, so they don't have to necessarily engage with a computer or device. They can do paper and pencil with their families. And I think that what has become really, really a message I've been trying to give folks all along is that, and I actually heard this, I think exercise is very important to keep you energized and focused. And so I have a Peloton, and during one of my rides a couple weeks ago, one of the instructors said, what we're looking for here is persistence, not perfection. And I can't think of a better statement for us to live by in these times. We're all going so quickly. We are all doing things that none of us were trained for or planned on doing. And so the message I'm giving to staff, and frankly myself, is it's persistence. It's keeping at it. It's trying to be better than the next day than the day before, learning as you go, not expecting perfection, but just keeping in it. But I think too, Doug, I will come back to the fact that this is my 8th year in the district, and I know the community. I have a wonderfully supportive board and team, but it really is that Highline Promise that is, as I said earlier, the DNA of our system. That's what binds us. And a quote that was shared with me, my team, I have a coach that works with my cabinet and she led us through an exercise to really, ask ourselves, what gets us to show up every day? Why are we a part of this team? Why are we here? And this was before all this happened. And she synthesized it in the following statement: I'm energized by others who share my commitment to our Highline Promise. And I think that goes for everyone in this system. I think that we all, in our mission to educate children and to support them and their families, we are energized by one another because we all share this fierce commitment to knowing every student by name, strength, and need. And I think that's what really sets Highline apart, particularly in times of crisis, but I would say any day of the year under normal circumstances.
I'm not going to pin you down on this because it would be unfair. But while you were talking, I was thinking about online learning, distance learning, what the implications might be of this experience we've gone through, where we built this capability, or at least we had it, but we've expanded it tremendously throughout the district in response to a crisis. I wonder what change that might portend in terms of educational methodology and whatnot post-crisis. Or will it just be a historical artifact that we responded to a crisis, we rose to the occasion, and that we got kids through the academic year successfully, and job well done? Or does it have long-term implications? Are you all thinking about that?
Absolutely. So I will start with, I believe that distance learning in some way, shape, or form is now permanently a part of K-12 public education. Given the nature of this virus, given the unknowns, given that it's likely we may have extended absences again, distance learning is going to be a part of what we do. So we have to get good at it. However, we can be really good at it, but if every child isn't connected to the internet, we have a problem. So I think one of the really good things that could come out of this, Doug, is I know that I, along with many of my superintendent colleagues around the country, are vociferously advocating for broadband access for all students in their homes. Distance learning simply can't happen at scale without it. And frankly, I think that internet access now needs to be a part of basic education if we acknowledge that distance learning is now a part of basic education.
Out of curiosity, how would that be paid for?
Good question. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Maybe I shouldn't ask that.
No,
Put
you
you on
should
the spot.
absolutely ask that. I think this is the conversation du jour, frankly. I mean, this is what everyone is talking about. Doug, there are a number of people around the country who are calling for it to be treated like a utility, like water, that internet needs to be something that is accessible to all, not just some. And so,
well, our country's future economically might heavily depend on it.
It may very well. Yes. So I do think that we are going to learn a lot from this. And I do believe that moving forward, our system will look different in some ways. And I think that has opportunities and limitations, and probably, some things that we'll miss that we will be doing differently. But yes, I do see permanent changes down the line.
A lot to think about.
Yes, sir.
Post-crisis.
Yes.
Now, Susan, there's another dimension, as you know, of the Energizer-in-Chief role, more therapeutic, if you will. I think of it as the inspirational dimension of the role, the motivational dimension, calming fears, and so on. Tell us how you've played that role.
Sure. Well, I've often said that there are likely many aspects of the superintendency that have been common since the beginning of time. But I think being a superintendent in the age of social media is very different than it was being a superintendent prior to the age of social media. And it comes with some real challenges, but it also comes with tremendous opportunity. And I think that this particular moment in time is proving the opportunity that we have with social media to communicate with our staff, our families, our students. So I have made it a point on a mostly daily basis, several times a week, to be on Twitter and Instagram sharing, just checking in with people, sharing some sort of motivating quotes. As I think I said to you earlier, thank God for Mr. Rogers, because he is a treasure trove of inspiration for educators. He just knew how to get right to the point and get to the heart of the matter, but really just getting the message out to people that we are in this together. That we're not alone, that I struggle too. I think that it's important for me to share that I am grappling with many of the things that they are grappling with, and also to share the good stories that are out there. So I think right now, being sort of the inspirational part of being an Energizer-in-Chief isn't just about being a rah-rah cheerleader. I think it's about three very distinct things. I think the first one is around encouragement. I'm really encouraging our community to stay positive, to know that there are good things going on, to take care of themselves. I think that's incredibly important at this time. So using social media and other methods to encourage folks during this time is part of that inspiration role. I think honesty is a huge part of, and I know that might not seem an obvious when you're talking about inspiration, but I do think and maybe inspiration is the word, maybe it's just sort of affirming or calming or comforting to know that your leader is there and is solid and is going to get through this with you, but that I'm human too, and I'm struggling, and I know you're not perfect. I know you're not getting the job done perfectly, because neither am I.
I think honesty, by the way, is tremendously important. In the middle of a bewildering crisis that we don't fully understand, COVID-19 is a very new thing that can't easily even be tested for. There's no vaccine.
No, there's not. And I think focusing on the, sort of the humanizing factor here. I think what honesty does is it focuses on that human connection that we have, and that, we are all in this together, and it is a challenging time, but we can do it. And I think, as a leader, being very much, with your community, not separate from your community. And I think that honesty is critically important. Which
I think I said in a recent blog post that you saw, Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 said to Americans, these aren't his words, but he said basically, here are the facts. This is a tremendous crisis.
Yeah.
The facts are the facts. No need to downplay that.
Yeah.
But you are Americans and you can do it. You are a resilient people. And if we work together, we can work our way out of this.
Well, and I think that that notion of morale, you know, and keeping people's spirits up is very real. And so I would say, you know, in addition to encouragement and honesty, appreciation is very important around this inspirational component. So, you know, making sure that we're thanking people. So, for example, one of the sites where we distribute meals is our central office, and I try to go and help out when I'm there 2 days a week. And last Friday, I think it was, last Friday, we've changed it to Mondays and Wednesdays, but last Friday, I brought tulips for all of the folks that were helping to get the meals and the materials going. And, you know, I said, it's thank you tulips. Just, you know, I just got them at the grocery store. It was nothing fancy, but it was just to say to them, I see you, I appreciate you. And in this time of complete uncertainty and challenge, these small moments of appreciation matter. And I think too, now that I have a little bit of room to breathe, now that we're 5-6 weeks into this, trying to reestablish that which we do in person to do from a distance. And so, for example, one of the things we do in Highline is I give Ducky awards. I have these rubber ducks with mortar boards and a diploma, and it has our Highline Promise of every student by name, strength, and need printed on them. And staff can nominate anyone in the district for going above and beyond and delivering on our promise. And I probably give out 4 to 6 of them a month. And I go to the school and give the person their rubber ducky, and I read the nomination, and there's usually tears and clapping from the student. It's a lovely, lovely tradition. And obviously I can't do that right now in the way that we normally do it. So we do virtual Duckies. So we created a template with our promise and with the photo of the person who won. And I'm making each week I'm making phone calls to the winners just to let them know we're going to be tomorrow releasing that you're a Ducky winner and here's why, and congratulations and thank you. So it's not the same, but again, it lets people know that they matter and that the way in which they're stepping up right now and what they do to make this Highline community as special as it is appreciated, I think keeps people going too.
Encouragement, honesty, and appreciation. Pretty powerful trifecta, I would say. Now, a closing question, Susan. What have you learned? What lessons have you learned about crisis management from this COVID-19 experience? I can't say that you've gone through, that you are going through. So what lessons up to now, since we're still in that crisis, have you learned from this about managing crisis?
Yeah, I'm learning a lot every day. That's for sure. As I said in another interview recently, none of us took leading schools through a global pandemic in grad school. So this is one that we don't have a real roadmap for. I will say, though, that one of my favorite quotes out of this, and then I'll get to my lessons learned, Aaron Prince, who's a superintendent near me here in Washington, said, "Courage is our roadmap." And I love that because that really is true. We don't have another roadmap right now, but our courage will get us through. So I think what I've learned, Doug, is first of all, and this is true during any time, but especially now, focus on the people. I think I said early on, it was making sure we had the basic needs of our students and our families met, because we are working as well with our Highline Schools Foundation and others to make sure our families are getting grocery gift cards and all of that. So focusing on people, our students and our families, but also our staff. Making sure that my staff had what they needed in terms of clarity of roles and responsibilities, but also just checking in with them on a human level. I will say, this has taken a toll and continues to take a toll on people. Not only are folks trying to manage how to work in a different way, but they're managing their own lives. And many of them are being impacted by this, by having their own children at home, or sadly having a family member or friend fall ill to the virus. So really focusing on people and checking in with them. My first question whenever any meeting that I'm in, any phone call, Zoom, whatever, is, how are you and your family doing? Is everybody safe and healthy? Because that's the most important thing. One thing that my team here hears me say all the time, and I say it constantly, is health and family first, always. The work will always be there. In my experience, the work fairies never show up in the middle of the night and get it done for you. It will be waiting for you tomorrow. So putting health and family first is always important. It's never been more important than it is now. And I think as a leader, I've learned the importance of my focusing on that and modeling it, and when needed, ordering it. And I say that lovingly. My chief academic officer is, I think, the best in the country. And what she and her team have done is nothing short of heroic. But at the end of last week, her tank was pretty empty. And I said to her, can you take, this was Thursday afternoon, we were having a conversation, can you take tomorrow off? And she goes, I think I can take some time off tomorrow. I said, you really need to. You need to take the weekend. Well, sure enough, later that weekend, I get an email from her. So I respond to the email and I answered her question. And then I said, now get off email. And we've worked together now for 8 years. So she knows me and I love her. And she knows I was saying that out of love, but really telling people you've got to really, distance yourself a little bit from the work at times so that you can create that balance. And I think too that the importance as a leader of focusing on the basics and modeling that which we want for others. I think I shared with you one of my challenges right now is balancing my need to be a good leader with my need to be a good citizen. And how do I model that for the community? And what I mean by that is we're under a stay-at-home order. Well, I want to model for my folks that I'm doing that too. And at the same time, I have staff who are physically showing up every day to provide meals, to hand out devices, to make sure payroll gets done, all of that. So I'm going to go in a few days a week and help people do those things or just be there with them. And so striking that balance, I think, is important. But again, I think it comes back to modeling and honesty and focusing on the basics and focusing on people, and a lot of breathing.
Susan, when we were talking earlier, before we began the formal interview, you mentioned how closely you've worked with the board through all of this.
Yes.
I'm assuming they've been very, very supportive as you played this Energizer-in-Chief role.
Yeah, our board is extraordinary. We have a 5-member board. Many of them attended Highline schools, graduated from or have children who have gone here. So very deep connections to the community. What's really, I think, been amazing, obviously the board is not doing their normal board duties as they normally would in times. And I'm doing check-ins with them. And one of the things a couple of them said to me last week was they really miss being more engaged. And so I think too, as a superintendent in this time, making sure that the board still feels their critical role in being the governance team of the district. So I'll give an example. What a big issue right now everywhere is the class of 2020 and the fact that they are not going to get the commencement that, at least they're not going to get it in June, right? We're looking at, can we extend it, what have you. So we did a thought exchange, a survey type thing with our seniors and everyone who loves them. And we're going to do a webinar I'm going to do a webinar next week, sharing what we heard and getting their questions. And I said to the board, what if we all did it together so that our community and our seniors see you and me together, communicating with them, saying, we get it. This just stinks, and there's nothing we can do to prevent that. But we want you to know we hear you and we will make sure you get that ceremony. We don't know when it's going to happen, but you're going to get it. So the board and I will be doing that together next week. And we may actually do additional webinars together on other topics with the community just to really stay engaged and make sure that there's two-way communication going on. But it really is a through line, right, of dedication and I think selflessness and collaboration that defines Highline. It's from the board to the central office, to the classroom, to the parking lot, to the kitchens, to the maintenance facilities. I mean, everybody here is stepping up and bringing their best selves to the job each and every day so that in the midst of this crisis, we don't lose sight of our promise. And that is that we know every child by name, strength, and need, so they graduate prepared for the future they choose.
I love that promise.
Me too.
Susan. Well, folks, we've been listening to and learning from Dr. Susan Enfield, Superintendent of the Highline Schools in Washington State. And I think anyone watching this would agree, an Energizer-in-Chief Extraordinaire.
Thank you, Doug.
You're doing a great job, Susan, and I'm sure your colleagues, students, parents, colleagues in the administration, board members appreciate your playing that very, very critical role, both the educational dimension of it and the inspirational dimension.
It's a joy and an honor to be able to do it, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know what your schedule's like, so spending this time with me is a bit of a sacrifice, and I truly...
I've enjoyed it immensely.
And I too, and I want to thank you very much.